Well, good morning. Dr. R. Michael Fisher. Just wanted to share the story that I heard last night and spin off this story. And it's really the theme around what is it children wish for? In a way, it's my one of my series of videos on stone teachings for children. And of course, they're for adults, for children, for the benefit of children. What is the world demanding of children today that we as adults ought to be paying attention to? Really, that's kind of the whole theme I've done of this series, the Stone Teachings. Um, you can check that out on my other videos. You can check out some videos I've done recently where I've explored a little bit on children in relationship to death, to the dying process, and their awareness and awakening. I've also been talking about children as a center focus for the philosophy and the understanding of what I call philosophical disability. And it's a kind of adult correction that's required in this world, I believe, in a world that we've built very unsustainable for life, for not just life, right? The beauty of the ecological life, the planet, and the well being of all beings, but for children. It's like a real concrete focus. And I brought that into notions of some of what I call political disability, and how we have to think and talk within the reference point of the life of a child. And I've often used this phrase, interestingly enough, think about what you say as an adult, what you do as an adult, in a kind of ethical stance related to if you had a 10-year-old in front of you listening to you, or you were in actual dialogue with that 10-year-old in a very authentic way. So you can hear, not the only thing I talk about in my work on fear and fearlessness and on education, and what I call the therapeutic education, which we have a right to talk about. You don't have to be a therapist or a clinical expert or psychologist or psychiatrist or medical doctor to talk about and to explore and be and understand and create with this notion of what is the therapeutic wish, potential, reality of what's going on with our children. In other words, the question is, how are our children doing today? Well, go on the internet, which I have done. And recently, you'll see many articles. How are the children doing? And you've got a lot of people putting out videos, some of them experts. One of them, a fear expert, Frank Ferretti, for example, who I've studied for many years. And he's saying the children are not doing okay. And he does a big video on it. Well, unfortunately, I find all of those articles, references, many that I've looked at anyway, I haven't looked at them all, and this has been part of my experience for many years. I find the perspective that they take, the authors, again, depending what their background is, but they're all coming from the helping fields more or less, or sometimes they're coming from political fields, and sometimes they're coming from parenting and mothering fields and so on, of concern for how are the children doing. And my finding is often, just this is kind of my intuitional summary or as a pattern of what I see, is that we still have very little capability to actually go into and be with the children's perspective. Some psychoanalysis, child psychoanalysis, for example, I find is much more sensitive to that. Another video. Won't go into that here. So that's my focus of interest around the children and questions of children and how to be with them in the world, with ourselves as adults, with them in the world, and where the demands of the world are taking us all in a very, very trying time, to say the least. So the story that is the focus of this video won't be long. It's a short story, but it's came from a friend who visited last night, and a friend I've known for over 30 years, or near 30 years at least, and followed her healing journey. Definitely someone who has dealt with addictions, abuse, and just growing up as a woman in a obviously an awakened, very different condition than perhaps many around her, and never ever felt fit in. And many people would have that common experience, but hers has been a long, powerful journey, and great to see she's even become a professional counselor in the last decade plus. And very successful in all that work. Okay. So the story was, as she shared last night, after being on a healing weekend in a group, and she was very sensitive when she came and met with us here at our house, had tea, and was her chatting. I said, "So how's your daughter doing?" And she shared her daughter, who's now I think in her 30 plus years, has a grandchild, 11 years old, and the story around the grandchild was my friend said that she's now this grandma, right? She has, I think, two or three grandchildren with this first daughter, who also struggles with addictions, with mental health issues, manic depressive, etc., many addictions for over years, but is also, cleaned up her life a lot and doing her best to handle the challenges of living as a single mom. So my friend, the grandma, just to be clear, help you out here, she tells the story. And it's a serious story, but it's a beautiful story, I think, in the sense that it's so simple. I love this kind of wisdom of children. So the story goes, I mean, you have to sort of laugh. It has to throw you off your seat a bit, folks. I mean, I'm throwing off my seat a bit just listening to it last night. But I smiled, and yet then I thought how grave, how gravitas the pull is on the reality of what was spoken by the child. Child's 11 years old, very social, apparently. Just loves to be around people, loves to be in the center of making people happy and helping. Okay, well, there's a lot of caregiving in that background of that family line, as my friend, again, being the grandma. I know her. She's a caregiver through and through. So the 11-year-old is asked by the grandma, "So, dear, oh, what do you want for your birthday? You're turning 11 this year." This really interesting question. What do you want for your birthday? Well, the thing about birthday is so interesting is it's all about what you wish for. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind because that's the subtext. What is it children wish for today? Any day, but their birthday in the world as it is today. Get it? Context? Child says immediately to her grandma, "I'd like to go for counseling." Whoa, what a great wish. I can only imagine the facial looks as they're looking at each other having the exchange. "What do you want for your birthday?" "I want a counseling session," or two, or three. And they're looking at each other, and I think, what a phenomenal encounter, right? It's really phenomenologically the depth of it, the existential depth of that reality, right? The authenticity of what is it you wish for right now as you turn 11. It just moves me so much to take that in what is being exchanged with that other human being. Obviously, she trusts her grandma a lot. She probably knows well her grandma is a professional counselor. She grew up around her grandma being that all her life. But regardless of all that, nobody encouraged this daughter to go do counseling. No one. She's actually doing well in the world. She's very socially accepted, blah blah blah. So grandma asked the question in return, um, "Why do you want to go for counseling?" She says to her. Great question, obvious. And the child said, "So I can talk to somebody." Yeah. Subtext underneath. So I can talk and be listened to in a way I cannot be listened to in the world of my friends, of the normal society, of my relationship with all others. a counselor is something different. And great, she wants an adult counselor. So it's one way for a child to connect with the adult world, but without having to try to become or grow into the adult world through expectations of the normal growing up. What your school teacher wants from you, what your friends want from you, what your parents want from you, what your aunt and uncles and grandmother and who knows what else the society wants from you as a child. But you're like going, well, okay, yeah, sure, I have to grow up and become in the adult world. So the child feels in those incredible pulls of expectations, explicit and or implicit. They're there, but not with the counselor necessarily. The counselor is there to, so I can talk to somebody, quoting the 11-year-old child. And I use that as a metaphor for every child out there on the planet. What they wish for their birthday is to be able to talk to somebody and be listened to in a very special way that a counselor, a therapist, a guide, a great mentor would do. You know, that's the theory. So my theory of the child is they actually wish for, at the deepest level, at the authentic level of their being, someone they can talk to and that they will be listened to without all those expectations that the normal world puts out. So it seems like a simple idea I'm putting forward here today. Hopefully, it's stirring around in your mind, whether you're a parent, whether you're an uncle or an aunt, or some other relationship to children. And it comes back to we have to also ask, well, why is that? Why would an 11-year-old? And I'm not just talking about this individual, I'm talking about every child wanting that. Well, that's my theory. And well, okay, so what's the basis of my theory? They want that because that is how a human being restores themselves and heals themselves with the witness attending the unconditional attention and regard of what we have now trained counselors, therapists supposedly to offer in a special space called a sacred room, right? That has this container. You're here for an hour. It's all private. No one else is going to know what was said here. You can go back to your life. Yeah, it's a dropout, right? It's a coming out of, it's a leaving the norm society. This child, all 11-year-olds, I'm just using the metaphor, but I think it's a wonderful age. And I've thought about the age of 10 and 11, something really special seems to go on there. I'm just getting vibes of that from a few different directions of my own research and thinking and writing, reflecting on life. This very special time of the child having to figure out how to negotiate that world that they're being pushed into, especially with prepubescence, into all the expectations and consumerism of child becoming adult buyer purchaser and working in the military industrial complex of the world, capitalist world. So I'm talking about children growing up in the world I live in here, not in a so-called third world country in another nation where maybe that expectation is quite different. Maybe it's even more severe. I don't know. I'm not going to speak about those places I haven't been and grown up in. But here, the child I'm aware of, and I hear these things, it's empirical evidence. The child wants that without prompting because they want to restore and heal themselves. Well, what would you really wish for if you had sort of everything? And this child's not rich by any means, they're not super wealthy, had probably all kinds of very fancy, incredible birthdays with all these gifts and parents having to spend so much money on birthdays. There's all kinds of articles now on the mania of what goes on in children's birthday parties, the excess, abundance, materialist, in the name of fun, happiness, happy birthday. But here's the child, right, that just cuts through the 11-year-old. What do you want? I wish for. You know, you can just imagine her blowing out the candles on her cake. She's wishing. What do you wish for? Every child underneath is wishing for counseling. I'm just using that term, right, to represent all of what I've said about this sacred space, this sacred relationship with another person, particularly an adult, capable of listening in all those ways that I've said of high quality. And that's their education. She's wishing for an education beyond the education she's getting in the world, an education that actually is about restoration and healing. And I'm an educator, curriculum designer, and I go, where is that in the curriculum for K to 12? Where is that in preschool, early childhood education, where a child gets to wish for that which is restorative and healing for them, and ultimately liberating? And I'm not afraid to use that word, as you can see. That's what the child wants. That's what every human being wants. So blessed be to this child who utters the utterance through all the falsities and or surfaces, through all the dramas of the everyday normal world, and cuts through with what I really wish for. Blows out the candles. I wish this will come true. Well, great. For this particular grandma, she was able to phone a few counselors that she knew and got the child a counselor for her birthday. No big deal. But again, in an ordinary family that, you know, the parents are not counselors, right, or the grandparents or whoever, that's a much harder wall to crack through and to see is, oh, is there anything wrong with you? Why do you want counseling? You know, the parent freaking out already with fear already pouring onto the child just because they want to restore themselves and heal themselves in this sacred space container, which is what counseling offers. I think you really get the picture of how wonderful that is to have come to this story. So I'm so glad to share it. My last point about it as I end the video is, where do we sit down, whether it's in school, and I really mean from early childhood education onward, where do we sit down within our family systems and spaces, and even create the options, the menu, drop down menu, when we're with that child. We can do that with children. So here's the practical takeaway. What can I do to actually offer the child, oh, your 11th birthday is coming up, whatever birthday, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know when you'd want to start the drop down, but you could do it. And I think we actually ought to, as parents, adults, caregivers, those adults who are concerned about children in the future and the world that we're going into, give them a drop down menu of, here's some options for you for your birthday. Just want to list them for you. I know you probably have your own ideas, so let's list those too. So you create 2 lists and you go over them one by one with that child as their birthday is approaching. Maybe you do it a week ahead of their birthday. Maybe you do it a month ahead, so that they are actually reflecting continually off and on, not obsessively. You're not going to obsessively put this on them, but you're just going to deliver it to them in the right moments. And you create these 2 lists. Maybe they're up on the wall, in the fridge, and the child's going, wow, I really get to wish for that. That's the thing that's so amazing about a birthday. You actually get to share in a certain kind of way. You're supposed to have the wish you want come true. Hopefully, if you blow out all the candles, the magic of that. If you have the right people around you, you know, the adults who could deliver that gift, and so on. But the child doesn't have a menu, so they're going to pick all the standard things that everybody's having for birthdays, the normal families, so-called, in a world that is normal is killing us, our value system, and all the gut and excess and abusiveness that is behind so much of the consumer purchasing and the pursuit of happiness through materiality goods, missing this deeper existential restoration and healing and liberation path for children. So, be interesting. Adults could put that one on the list, is that you could actually ask for counseling in your wish list. Child's probably not going to come up with that in their own, right? It's because it's not on their menu of the norms of what children ask for, and they probably would, just think they would be too weird to even ask for that. And they just can't imagine it. And so that's the beauty of the adult. Give them some things they can imagine and get them started. And by the time their birthday comes, or a day before or two, whoa, okay, whoa, those children are going to have a very different kind of birthday. That's my talk for today. Thanks for listening, folks. Let's comment on the link below. If you want to watch this or give any likes to this video, what you wish for this video I've just offered you today on the beauty of the truth of the 11-year-old.